Hi there, welcome to this video where we're restoring and hopefully bringing back to life a lovely old 1939 Brown Junior spark ignition engine. Now in the last video we struggled and eventually managed to strip this engine down. It was really difficult because the cylinder screws into the crankcase and it was a really tight fit. But anyway, what we did is we found that once I'd got it stripped down, that the Conrod was bent in several places and worn kind of in an unusable fashion. We'll have a quick look at that in a minute. And the gudgeon pin or the wrist pin was in two pieces. So what we need to do, and we're going to do in this video, is we're going to make a new Conrod and we're going to make a new gudgeon pin. So I'll just quickly have a look at what we've got and then we'll get on and make it. Right, well here are the components of this lovely Brown Junior that I got stripped down in the last video. And we've got the Conrod, which is looking nice and straight now, but you can see from this picture here that it was really quite badly bent. And I think the reason it was bent is because if we can see here, look, the gudgeon pin is in two pieces, and I think that caused the Conrod to cock over and put these bends in it. You can see here in this picture how I straightened it. I put it in the vise with a few pressure points. So you could say, well, okay, it's straight now. Doesn't look too bad actually, so why aren't we going to use this one? Well, the little end, because the Conrod was bent and cocked over, the little end has worn quite badly, and it's sort of like an hourglass. It's quite big at the ends of the bearing surface, so it's not really that good. And the big end here on the Conrod is really worn, where it's been rubbing on the back of the back plate. And if we put that on the crank pin, we can see that, if I bring that in, hopefully that's in focus, you can see that we've lost quite a lot of surface because it should be out here. So we've probably lost a millimetre, something like that, of bearing surface. So the best thing is let's make a new one. And I also obviously need to make a new gudgeon pin. Now I've got some 1/4 inch aluminium here, which I'm going to be using to make the new Conrod. Right, well, I've got my bit of aluminium milled up so it's nice and parallel. I've got myself a centre line down the middle, and I put in a centre punch mark, and now I've set my calipers to exactly 2 inches, and I'm just going to mark the position for the second hole. I want to get these just right. There we go. So now we can get that centre punched up, and then we can drill those holes and get them reamed. I'm just putting them over the points just to check. Yeah, that looks absolutely fine. Right, well that last bit of machining that you saw me doing on the mill was just making up a jig to hold the aluminium that I've just drilled and reamed so that I can shape around the radiuses around the top, the bottom, and also to thin the shaft down. Now I've got my sort of piece of aluminium here with the two holes for the big end and the little end drilled in it, and they're reamed and they look really nice. I'm really pleased with that, and they line up lovely with the existing Conrod, the distance between the big end and the little end, and it is exactly 2 inches. I did make one and I wasn't absolutely happy with it. It was just very slightly off, which, to be honest, the distance between the big end and the little end, to be honest, in the running engine it was just a fraction, and it may not have made any difference, but I wasn't happy knowing that. But there is always an upside, because I've got 2 now and there's very little difference between them, like I say, except for that very slight distance. But what I can do is I can use this with my jig, the scrap one, and just practice just doing those radiuses to make sure I know exactly what I'm doing before I do the one that's going to be the finished rod. But anyway, let's have a look at that jig, and then I'll get on and start to machine up this, I don't know whether you'd call it a blank, but this piece of aluminium into a Conrod. Right, well this is my scrap one, which I'm going to be practicing on in a bit, so we'll put that to one side. We've got the one that I'm happy about the distances between the big end and the little end, and I've made this jig, and it's just a piece of aluminium, and I've turned a piece that will go like that in there, little radius, which is going to be the radius of the little end, and I've got another piece there that is the radius of the big end that I want to machine around. So I want to machine around these without actually touching those or taking anything off. And what we can do is we can put our piece of aluminium on there, and we can bolt that in place. There we go. And I've done a couple of cutouts, which is the bit you saw me machining, and I can bolt. I need to trim these bolts a little bit, but I can put the nut on, and we've still got a nice flush side that we can use some parallels to put that in the chuck. But that's how that is going to work. So I can machine around those now, and like I say, I can practice on that. So I'll get set up and we'll start to do some of that machining. Right, well I've been doing a little bit of machining with this duff piece where the holes I wasn't totally happy with. Now this is my top copy, so we've got to get this right, hopefully. I've got this bolted in there so it'll rotate. I've got it oiled and tightened up nice and tight, so there's very little up and down movement, because you know we don't want to be moving it up and down into the cutting bit. So I'm going to feed it round this way, because I found it's much smoother going that way. It hasn't got a tendency to grab, and I'm always trying to keep 2 hands on it and keep my fingers well out of the way. And then I'm taking it off the cut to take it down a little bit, and then bringing it back onto the cut. So anyway, let's see how this goes. Go. Now this is going to be a fairly slow laborious process, but I would rather it was slow and it worked out right with no problems than have to do it again. Right, you can see I've taken this down now 1.6 mil. So I'm going to turn it over and we'll do exactly the same the other side, and that should hopefully give us the right thickness for our Conrod. I'll then run down the sides to get the same height at this end. So I'll turn that over now anyway. Right, so we're just going to take a cut across the top. And we're just going to rotate this round 90 degrees. There we go. And now we're just going to keep doing that, so I'm going to lower it just a little bit more. I'm not taking very big cuts with this. Like I said earlier, I think I would much rather be taking lots of small cuts than try and do it with a big cut and have a problem. Again, you've got to be careful with your fingers. I'm actually putting my fingers on the turret back here and then just using my thumb as a stop rather than trying to get my fingers in the way. If I put my fingers on the turret, at least I know where they are and well away from this cutting blade, which would make small work of your fingers. So I will get on and do this, and we'll have a look once that end's done. Right, now got this nicely machined, and we've got it down to 1.6 on either side, which should give us a centrally placed Conrod that is the size that we wanted. I can't remember what it was. It was just over 3 mil. I think it was 3.1 mil. And you can see this is nicely rounded off on the big end there. So I'm really pleased with how that's looking. So I'm going to take it out the clamp now, that device, and just check it's okay. And then we'll look at the next stage. Right, I've got the Conrod now bolted down onto the piece of aluminium, bolted both ends so it's nice and secure. And I've got the big end nicely rounded. I've got this the right thickness here, and what I want to do now is round off the little end, and I've got exactly the same process to do as I did with the big end, but I want to make sure that the height or the amount I shave off is identical to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this surface here on both sides as a reference, and I'm just going to mill this down to about there, sort of not touching up to there but getting close to it, and then we can proceed to do the little end, and we'll know when we've got to the right depth there to match this. So I'll trim that along now. Right, now that side is taken down more or less, I think. I'm going to do one very slight thin pass, but I don't want to take off any more of the material which is close to the big end. That is just shaving it now, very, very slightly, I think. So I'm just going to do a nice slow pass with this, and hopefully, I mean, I'm going to clean this up anyway. But the closer I can get it on the milling machine, the better. And because it does produce a lovely finish, it's a really nice cut. Right, well, this is really getting on now, so it's time for another update. I've shaved off both sides of the Conrod, got the big end done, and I've done the little end on the underside, which you can't see, and now I'm just going to do around the top here and the top there. Once we've got that done, all that's left to do besides finishing it, just cleaning it up, is to take off the sides a little bit. So I'm going to get on and do this now. It gets more nerve-wracking the more I do, because the closer to the end, the bigger the stakes if it goes wrong. So we're just going to feed this around now. Very careful to look after our fingers. Sorry if my fingers are in the way of the camera, but my fingers have to take priority. There we go. So I will just keep getting this done, and then we'll have a look when it's done. Right, well hopefully I'm on the last bit of the milling now, and all I'm doing is just cleaning up the side edges, removing material so that the sides are in line with the big end straight up to the little end. So then it'll be cleaning up with needle files and emery paper just to smooth it all off and make it nice. Right, well, now is the time to unbolt it and see what we've got, but that's looking nice, and quite a bit of work now with the file, but I'm sure that'll be fine. Right, I'll get this unbolted. Right, well here's my two Conrods. We've got the new one on the side, right hand side here, and you can see it's got bigger bearings. It's a little bit thicker and or wider should I say, and a little bit thicker, so it is a more substantial Conrod. Now if I was going to make this again up to this point, I would probably use a different milling bit to do around here, so I get a little bit of a radius so it's less likely to fracture, but it is a lot bigger than this very thin original one, so I think it's going to be fine like this. It's obviously got a lot of cleaning up to do. I want to put a radius on all these edges here because they're quite sharp at the moment. And now we need to, I'm just going to zoom out and we're going to try it on the crankcase or on the crank pin and see if it fits. Right, now obviously this might look good, but if it doesn't fit, it's a waste of time. So hopefully we can get it on. Oh, and let me just show you. You can see the width of the big end bearing there is a lot bigger now because this one had worn down. So this should hopefully occupy, yeah, it occupies the full big end bearing. I don't know whether that shows there, but you can see actually there's just a little bit of the crank pin sticking out, but that's fine, and it seems to work really nicely. We don't seem to have any problems there. What we do need to do though is put it together with the piston on and the cylinder and make sure that it's not catching on the sides here as it goes up and down, just at kind of that point there. Actually that is catching a little bit, but one of the things that putting the radiuses on here is it'll take a little bit more material off, and it is just the corners that are catching, I think. But anyway, that's something I need to check because there's no point putting this together if the Conrod is actually catching on the crankcase. So I'm going to start cleaning this up now with the needle file, and then we'll have a look. Right, well I now have my Conrod finished. It's all cleaned up and looking nice. As is the bench. I had a myriad of aluminium chips everywhere and I've kind of walked them throughout the house, so I need to do a little bit of vacuuming as well. But anyway, let's take a closer look at this rod and see what you think. Right, well here is the new Conrod and I'm really pleased with how that's looking, and just turn it over there. It is a little bit bigger than the original. The original is frighteningly flimsy. If I just hold the two together, in fact I'll tell you what, if I put them down and let go, that's probably easier. You can see it's a little bit bigger, not too big because we want to make sure that we don't have any binding issues within the crankcase, but hopefully it will be a lot stronger. I'm really pleased with how that's looking. It's come up absolutely lovely, and if we check that we can actually fit it, which is the all-important thing, there we go. And if I just rotate that slowly, we can see that is really nice, and the big end there is a really nice snug fit, just enough room for some oil. There we go. Well, I am so pleased to get this Conrod finished now, and it's time to move on to making the gudgeon pin or the wrist pin. I'm not going to do that in this video because I've done quite a lot in this video, and that'll be the next instalment of bringing this lovely old 1939 Brown Junior back into running working condition. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please come back and see how we get on in the next instalment, making the gudgeon pin and possibly building the engine back up. I'm not sure yet how I'll structure that. But anyway, thanks very much for watching.